What if I told you that having nothing is actually your biggest advantage? In From Dust to Dollars, we tear up the rulebook and show you how to build a fortune starting from absolute zero. No inheritance, no luck, just strategy. Listen carefully. You are not broke because you do not earn enough. You are broke because nobody taught you how to manage what you earn. School taught you how to obey a clock, finish a task, and wait for permission. It did not teach you how money moves, how wealth hides, or how families build power in silence. The truth is, hard work without financial control becomes a life sentence. You can sweat for 40 years and still hand your children the same fear you inherited. This audiobook is the blueprint nobody said out loud, not the public lesson, the private one. Here is the brutal question you must ask yourself tonight. If you keep doing exactly what you are doing right now, same habits, same spending, same excuses, where will you be in 10 years? Not where you hope to be, where you will actually be. Because hope is not a strategy, wishing is not a plan, and the system is designed to keep you exactly where you are, comfortable enough to consume, but never wealthy enough to walk away. The banks profit from your debt, the advertisers profit from your desire, the government profits from your taxes. Everyone is eating from your plate while you tell yourself that one day things will magically change. They will not. The only person who can change your financial future is staring back at you in the mirror, and that person has been avoiding the hard conversation for far too long. That conversation ends now. Chapter 1. The Inheritance of Confusion. You were handed a script long before you were handed money. That is the first trap. By the time your first paycheck hit your hand, your mind was already shaped to misread it. You saw income as relief. You saw spending as a reward. You saw saving as a delay. And assets, real assets. Those were never made real to you. They were treated like something distant people owned. People born into the right zip code, the right family, the right timing. So you worked. You worked because that was the rule. Work hard, be responsible, pay your bills. Hope life becomes easier. And for a while, that script feels honest, because your pain gets postponed every time money lands in your account. But postponed pain is still pain. It waits, it builds, it comes back with interest. Think about your earliest money memories. Were you taught strategy, or were you taught survival? The truth is, most people do not inherit wealth. They inherit confusion. They inherit fear wrapped in advice. They inherit phrases like, money does not grow on trees, rich people are greedy, and just be grateful you have a job. That kind of language does not just shape your opinion, it builds your ceiling. It tells you what is normal before you are old enough to question it. If you grow up watching adults panic at bills, then panic becomes financial logic. If you grow up hearing that comfort is dangerous and risk is foolish, then caution becomes a prison. If every adult around you trades time for money and calls that stability, then you start to think the only purpose of life is to survive the month. That is how a person can become hardworking and still remain financially blind. Hard work is not the problem. Blind direction is the problem. You can run hard in the wrong direction for 20 years and call it discipline, when it is really an unexamined habit. The truth is, effort without awareness creates exhaustion, not wealth. Read that again in your mind. Effort without awareness creates exhaustion, not wealth. This is where most people stop. They confuse motion with progress. They think being busy means they are building something. They think stress is proof of value. They think sacrifice automatically leads to freedom. But sacrifice without design just creates a cleaner version of struggle. Look at your own pattern. Do you earn, spend, recover, repeat? That cycle has quietly broken millions of lives. Not because those lives were lazy, because those lives were never shown how to convert labor into ownership. Nobody sat them down and said this clearly. Income is temporary. Ownership is leverage. Cash solves today. Assets solve tomorrow. And habits decide which future you get. You were likely taught how to apply for jobs, not how to buy time back. You were taught how to write a resume, not how to read a balance sheet. You were taught how to be chosen, not how to build something that chooses for you. That gap is not small. That gap is everything. When you do not understand money, every decision becomes emotional. You spend to feel relief. You save only after fear hits. You avoid investing because confusion feels safer than action. You chase appearances because appearances are visible, while quiet financial control looks boring from the outside. But the quietly wealthy understand something most people never learn. Boring is often powerful in plain clothes. The loud life is usually financed by insecurity. The quiet life is often backed by control. Status impresses strangers. Assets protect bloodlines. Those are not just sharp lines. That is a map. You do not need more noise. You need a new lens. You need to see that the game was never only about income. Income matters, but income without structure leaks. People with decent salaries stay trapped because every pay increase raises their standard of living. They do not buy freedom. They buy proof. Proof that they made it. Proof that they belong. Proof that the struggle meant something. Then the bills rise to meet the pride, and the prison gets decorated. That is why working harder alone does not save you. Pumping more effort into a broken system only breaks you faster. The answer is not shame. The answer is seeing clearly. Seeing that your current pattern may have been inherited, but it does not have to be kept. Seeing that broke is not just a number in an account. Broke is a way of thinking that treats money as a visitor rather than a worker. Money you spend once disappears. Money you direct with control can keep working after you stop. That difference changes families. If you never learned this, none of this is your fault. But from this moment on, it becomes your responsibility. There is power in that sentence. Responsibility sounds heavy to weak ears, but it sounds like freedom to disciplined ears. Because the moment you stop blaming the past, you start reclaiming the future. And that future will demand that you face a hard truth most people spend their lives avoiding. The trap is not just outside you. The trap has been rehearsed inside you for years, and it hides in the way you think about work, reward, and worth. Chapter 2. The Wage Trap. By now the surface has cracked. You can feel it. The old story starts to sound thin when you really listen to it. Work hard, get paid, repeat. It sounds stable until you notice the price. Your time leaves first. Your energy follows. Then your attention gets sold in pieces, day after day, until the paycheck feels less like victory and more like oxygen delivered through a tube. This is the wage trap, not work itself, the dependency. The condition where your entire life must keep producing labor at the same pace just to remain standing. You do not own your time. You rent your survival back every month. That is why so many people feel panic the moment income pauses. They are not living from a foundation. They are living from constant motion. If the motion stops, the fear speaks. Bills do not care about your exhaustion. Rent does not care about your effort. Debt does not care that you tried. How many weeks could your life continue if your paycheck stopped today? That answer tells the truth. The truth is, most people are not paid to build their future. They are paid to delay collapse. That is a brutal sentence, but it is clean. It explains why people with decent jobs still live on edge. It explains why promotions feel good for 3 weeks and then disappear into the same pressure. It explains why people celebrate raises and still lose sleep. The wage trap trains you to think in short distances. This bill, this weekend, this month. That mode of thinking can keep you alive, but it cannot make you free. Freedom requires distance. Freedom asks what happens next year, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. Freedom forces you to see the future before it arrives. Most people do not do that because short-term pressure eats long-term thought, and the system loves that. A person trapped in short-term thinking is easier to control, easier to market to, easier to distract, easier to keep running. If your mind is always fixed on immediate relief, then everything becomes urgent except the things that would actually save you. You say yes to overtime. You say yes to impulse spending. You say yes to debt that makes the present feel softer and the future feel harder. Then you call it normal because everyone around you is doing the same. This is where most people stop. They accept the trap because it is common, but common does not mean correct. Common only means repeated. If everyone around you is tired, broke, and performing success, why would copying them create freedom? It will not. The quietly wealthy do not worship wages. They respect income, but they do not confuse income with wealth. They know a paycheck is a tool, not an identity. They know wages can fund assets, but wages alone rarely create lasting power. That is why they focus on what remains after the workday ends. What did your labor buy that continues to serve you? Did it buy appearance, or did it buy leverage? Most people never ask that question. They ask a different one. Can I afford this? That question sounds practical, but it is often dangerous. Because if you can afford the monthly payment, your mind grants permission, but affordability is not the same as wisdom. You can afford many things that keep you poor. You can afford to impress people. You can afford to finance symbols. You can afford to drain tomorrow for the comfort of today. A weak question creates a weak life. A sharp question creates power. Not, can you afford it? Ask, does this move you toward ownership or deeper dependence? That question cuts through the fog. The wage trap also feeds your ego in a quiet way. It tells you your value equals your productivity. So when you work more, you feel more worthy. When you rest, you feel guilt. When you consider building slower, quieter wealth, you feel impatient because the rewards are not instant enough for your trained nervous system. You have been conditioned to need fast proof. A paycheck gives fast proof. Assets give slow proof, and slow proof requires maturity. That is why many people touch money and immediately reach for consumption. Consumption is visible. Ownership is silent. Consumption gets applause. Ownership often gets ignored, but applause does not pay your future. Silence does. What has your labor bought in the last 5 years that still pays you now? If the answer is almost nothing, the pattern is speaking. This is not about hating work. Work can be noble. Work can shape discipline. Work can create options. But only if the money that comes from work is commanded with intelligence. If every dollar exits as fast as it enters, then your labor is building somebody else's empire, while your own life remains fragile. That is the hidden insult. You can spend your strongest years proving your usefulness to a machine that never planned to make you free. The truth is, financial power begins the moment you stop seeing your paycheck as the finish line. It is the starting point. It is raw material. It is seed. And seed has one purpose. Not to be admired, to be planted. But before you plant anything wisely, you have to face the force inside you that keeps reaching for relief, display, and distraction the moment money arrives. That force is older than your budget. It lives in your habits, your pride, and the private hunger that makes poor choices feel deserved. Chapter 3: The Addiction to Relief. Money enters your hands, and something inside you starts talking. Not with words you hear out loud, but with pressure you feel. You have been carrying stress. You have been denied comfort. You have been told to wait, to grind, to be patient. So when money arrives, your first instinct is not strategy. It is relief. That is the addiction. Not always to luxury, Not always to reckless spending, sometimes just to the feeling of finally breathing. A meal you did not need, a purchase you can justify. A little reward because the week was hard, the month was long, and life felt unfair. Piece by piece, relief becomes a ritual. Then ritual becomes identity. You start telling yourself you deserve it. You probably do deserve rest, but rest and self-sabotage are not the same thing. How often has spending felt like medicine to you? That answer matters more than your budget. The truth is, most poor financial choices do not come from greed. They come from pain. People spend because they are empty, angry, lonely, tired, unseen, or numb. They spend because spending creates a temporary shift in state. It gives novelty, it gives stimulation, it gives the illusion of reward. For a brief moment, your life feels wider than it really is. Then reality returns. This is where most people stop. They only look at the purchase. They do not examine the emotion that drove it. So they keep trying to solve a behavior problem with math alone. They make a tighter budget. They set rules. They promise restraint. Then the next hard day arrives, and the old pattern walks back in, wearing a different outfit. Because the issue was never only numbers, it was your need to soothe yourself quickly. That is why two people can earn the same amount and live entirely different futures. One person treats money like a servant, giving it orders. The other treats money like emotional anesthesia. Same income, different nervous system, different destiny. You do not need every craving answered. You need to know what the craving is asking for. Sometimes the urge to buy is not about the thing. It is about control. You felt powerless, so you made an immediate choice. Sometimes it is about identity. You wanted proof that your life means something, so you bought a symbol. Sometimes it is about exhaustion. You were too drained to think long-term, so short-term pleasure won the argument. This is why discipline must go deeper than denial. If all you do is deny yourself without understanding yourself, the pressure builds underground. Then it erupts later, with more force. Real discipline is not punishment. It is clear sight. It is the ability to pause between feeling and action. It is the power to say, this urge is real, but it is not in command. That pause is expensive to the weak mind. That pause is priceless to the disciplined mind. Relief is not harmless when it becomes your financial leader. A life ruled by relief becomes fragile. The quietly wealthy often look less emotional around money because they trained that pause. They do not let every feeling vote. They know that every dollar has a future cost, even when the present cost looks small. They understand something hard. Small leaks sink slow ships. Most financial collapse does not happen in dramatic explosions. It happens in quiet habits, repeated without thought. Subscriptions nobody checks. Meals bought from fatigue. Clothes bought from insecurity. Upgrades bought from comparison. Convenience bought from lack of planning. None of it seems fatal in isolation. Together, it becomes a drain so constant that you no longer notice the wound. Your money leaves in line with your emotional patterns, not according to your intentions. That should wake you up. Intentions are cheap. Emotional training is rare. That is why the truth feels hard when you hear it clearly. If money keeps slipping through your hands, it may not be because life is against you. It may be because relief has been driving in the dark for years. And relief never asks what tomorrow needs. Relief only asks how to feel different now. There is another layer to this. Many people use spending to repair a private story about lack. If you grew up with less, you may use purchases to tell yourself you escaped. If you were overlooked, you may use status symbols to force visibility. If you feel shame around money, you may overcompensate by appearing polished while your foundation remains weak. It is not stupidity. It is pain trying to wear confidence. But pain in expensive clothes is still pain. Pain with a better phone is still pain. Pain with a nicer car is still pain. The truth is, If you do not heal your relationship with enough, you will never have enough. Because enough is not only a number, it is a state of command. It is the ability to say, I can have this, but I choose not to, because I serve something larger than the feeling of now. That sentence is power. That sentence separates adults from children with adult bills. Can you sit in discomfort without paying to escape it? If not, money will continue to control you. This chapter is not asking you to become cold. It is asking you to become honest. Honest about what you do when pressure rises. Honest about the private bargains you make with yourself after a difficult day. Honest about how often your wallet has been used to manage emotions your mind never learned to hold. Once you see that, the pattern loses some of its camouflage. You start to understand that the fight is not between you and money. The fight is between your future and your need for immediate relief. And behind that need stands another force that quietly keeps people broke, even when they know better. It smiles when you compare, stings when you feel smaller, and pushes you to spend just to be seen. Chapter 4. The Cost of Looking Successful. There is a pressure that never announces itself honestly. It does not say, I want to trap you. It says, look around, look at what they have, look at how they live, look at how they are seen. Then it waits for your pride to react. That pressure has emptied more bank accounts than bad luck ever did. You may tell yourself you do not care what people think. Most people say that. Then they dress for approval, spend for validation, and shape entire financial decisions around an audience that will not be there when the bills arrive. This is not weakness in the dramatic sense. It is a quiet surrender. A slow handing over of your choices to people who never earned that power over your life. Who are you trying to look successful for? Name them in your mind. The truth is, image is expensive when identity is unstable. If you do not know who you are, you will rent symbols to patch the gap. A better car, a better label, a better neighborhood, a better device. None of those things are evil, but when the motive is hunger for respect, the purchase stops being practical. It becomes psychological. It becomes a performance, and performance is costly. This is where most people stop. They only ask if the object has value. They do not ask if the motive is poison. The object may be useful. The motive may still be weak. That is how people justify spending they cannot sustain. They hide the emotional reason behind a logical sentence. I need it for work. I need to look professional. I need to enjoy life too. Sometimes those sentences are true. Often they are camouflage. Would you still buy it if nobody ever saw it? That question strips the performance bare. The quietly wealthy understand the difference between being rich and looking rich. Looking rich is public. Being rich is private. Looking rich often comes with payments, pressure, and fragile pride. Being rich comes with options, time, and room to breathe. The first is theater. The second is structure. The loud spender wants witnesses. The quiet builder wants leverage. Status fades quickly. Ownership compounds quietly. That is the split. A great deal of financial pain is born in comparison. Comparison distorts scale. It makes normal feel lacking. It makes discipline feel embarrassing. It makes a modest life feel like failure, because somebody louder is posting a more polished version of existence. Then you respond to their image with real money from your account. Think about how dangerous that is. You are trading real resources for emotional reactions to curated appearances. That is not financial strategy. That is mind control by spectacle. And modern life is full of spectacle. Everybody is broadcasting consumption. Very few are broadcasting restraint. Nobody posts the mortgage stress, the card debt, the fights, the panic, the refinancing, the sleepless nights. You see the watch. You do not see the chains attached to it. You see the vacation. You do not see the avoidance underneath it. You see the polished room. You do not see the empty reserves. You have compared your real life to somebody else's advertisement. That is a rigged contest. If your goal is generational wealth, you cannot afford a performer's mindset. Performers spend for reaction. Builders spend for return. Performers need the world to confirm them. Builders confirm themselves through quiet decisions repeated over time. That is why building wealth from nothing often looks unimpressive at first. No applause, no visible glory, no instant proof. Just control, just restraint, just choices that seem small until years reveal what they became. This is where most people stop. They cannot handle delayed respect. They want evidence now. They want the outer life to change before the inner life has earned it. So they rush the image and delay the foundation, and later the image collapses under the weight of reality. The truth is, fake abundance creates real scarcity. There is nothing noble about going broke to appear advanced. There is no power in wearing proof you have not built. Those lines matter because pride is subtle. Pride can make poverty look polished while the inside rots. Pride can keep you from admitting you bought the wrong things. Pride can stop you from downsizing, correcting, or saying no. Pride can make you loyal to a lifestyle that is draining your bloodline. What have you kept paying for just to protect an image? That question is heavy because the answer often comes with shame. But shame faced directly can become clean fuel. Shame avoided becomes another monthly payment. Quiet wealth requires a different emotional standard. It asks you to become unimpressed by what dazzles the crowd. It asks you to find dignity in simplicity while your assets are still small. It asks you to care more about peace than display, more about net worth than applause, more about your children's future than strangers' opinions. That last sentence is the dividing line. If you choose image over inheritance, you are spending bloodline resources on temporary theater. If you choose structure over spectacle, you begin changing the story. And that story cannot change if your desires continue to be shaped by what surrounds you. The next thing you have to face is harder still, because it is not just about what you buy. It is about the private beliefs that keep teaching you to choose comfort over truth, fear over ownership, and familiar struggle over unfamiliar control. Chapter 5. The beliefs that keep you small. By now, the enemy is harder to deny. It is not only out there, it is in the sentences you repeat to yourself without hearing them. The quiet beliefs, the inherited judgments, the mental rules that guide your choices before logic even gets a turn. A person can read books on money, hear good advice, and still stay trapped if the deeper belief system remains untouched. Because beliefs do not argue loudly, they direct quietly, and whatever directs quietly often runs the whole life. What do you feel when you hear the word wealth? Relief, suspicion, distance, guilt. Your first feeling reveals a lot. The truth is, many people want wealth and resent it at the same time. They admire what money can do, but they carry private hostility toward those who have it. That inner split matters. If part of you sees wealth as corruption, greed, coldness, or luck reserved for others, then another part of you will sabotage every move toward it. You cannot fully build what you secretly condemn. This is where most people stop. They stay on the surface and call their limits realistic. They say things like, "That world is not for people like me. I am just trying to get by. I do not need much. Money changes people." Those phrases sound humble. Often they are armor. They protect you from the responsibility of expansion. Because if wealth is dangerous, then staying small feels moral. But staying small does not make you pure. It often keeps you powerless, and powerless people cannot protect much. Money does not create character. It exposes it. That should change how you think. If your mind equates wealth with moral decay, you will keep shrinking your own horizon. You will undercharge, underinvest, undersave, and overgive in ways that drain you. You will make yourself easier to exploit because being effective starts to feel selfish. Then life punishes you for your confusion, and you call the punishment humility. There is another belief that destroys people from the inside, the belief that hard work alone should be enough. It sounds honorable, it sounds fair, it sounds clean, but life does not reward effort alone. Life rewards aligned effort, useful skill, strategic patience, and disciplined allocation. If you keep clinging to the idea that labor by itself must rescue you, then every time it does not, you feel betrayed. Then bitterness enters the room, and bitterness is expensive. Bitter people make poor decisions. Bitter people resist learning because learning feels like admitting the old model failed. Bitter people often double down on the very pattern that is breaking them. That is why some people stay broke for decades while working harder than everyone they know. Their effort is real. Their beliefs are lethal. They still think money should obey virtue without structure. They still think suffering automatically earns reward. They still think wanting more is somehow shameful until somebody else gets it. Then envy begins its work. Are you attached to struggle because it makes you feel honest? That question cuts deep for many people. Some people do not know who they are without struggle. Struggle gave them identity. It gave them a story. It gave them proof of endurance. So when life offers a chance to step into more order, more peace, more control, they resist it without realizing why. Chaos feels familiar. Familiar feels safe. Safe feels true. Then they keep rebuilding the same hard life and calling it fate. The truth is, some people are loyal to the pain that shaped them. That loyalty can keep you poor long after the original pain is gone. You cannot build wealth while worshipping struggle. You can respect what pain taught you. You cannot keep living under its command. Another small belief hides in plain sight. The idea that what you do not know cannot be changed, that ignorance is fixed, that finance is for other kinds of minds, that investing is too late, too risky, too confusing, too advanced. Those words sound practical, but they often serve fear. Fear loves complexity because complexity justifies delay, and delay is the quiet killer of financial growth. This is where most people stop. They tell themselves they will learn later, after work calms down, after debt shrinks, after the next raise, after life gets easier. But life rarely gets easier for the person who postpones clarity. Clarity must be taken, studied, repeated, protected. Confusion is expensive. Avoiding clarity is a choice. That choice has a cost. If you want generational wealth, your beliefs must be audited with the same seriousness as your bank account. You must ask what truths govern your money life right now. Do you see wealth as service or suspicion? Do you see ownership as possible or distant? Do you see discipline as freedom or punishment? Do you see yourself as someone who builds or someone who merely survives? Your answer is already shaping your future, and once those beliefs start breaking, something new becomes possible. Not hope in the weak sense, not fantasy, something cleaner, a turn in posture, a shift in command. Because after exposure comes decision, and decision is where financial power begins to separate from financial wishing. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Less. Now the turn begins, not in your circumstances first, in your posture, in the way you stand inside your own life. Once you see the trap, the wage dependence, the addiction to relief, the performance, and the beliefs that kept you small, there is only one honest question left. What are you willing to cut? That question makes people uncomfortable because cutting feels like loss. It feels like deprivation. It feels like moving backward while the world keeps flashing images of more. But the truth is, less is often the first language of power, not forced poverty, chosen restraint, the kind that says, I refuse to let comfort steal my future. What in your life looks normal, but is quietly draining your strength? That is where the cut begins. The discipline of less is not about making life empty. It is about making life intentional. It is about removing everything that weakens your position without strengthening your future. That includes spending, but it also includes habits, routines, environments, and people that keep training you toward waste. If your life is full of excess, your mind becomes noisy, and noise makes clear financial decisions harder. The quietly wealthy often look almost plain in the beginning because they are protecting margin. Margin is breathing room. Margin is the gap between what comes in and what goes out. Margin is what gives you the power to think instead of react. Without margin, every problem feels like an emergency. With margin, emergencies lose some of their teeth. This is where most people stop. They do not want margin as much as they want appearance. So they keep their life inflated. Inflated bills, inflated wants, inflated standards built from social pressure instead of actual need. Then they complain that nothing stays. Of course nothing stays. Their life is designed to consume everything. If your lifestyle keeps pace with your income, you are not growing. You are feeding a larger cage. That line should stay with you. Living below your means sounds simple, but it offends the ego. Your ego wants visible progress. It wants external signs. It wants your suffering to cash out in something the world can recognize. But building wealth from nothing demands that you disappoint that hunger. It demands that you choose future stability over present theater. It demands that you become comfortable, looking less advanced than you are becoming. That is hard. That is rare. That is power. The discipline of less also trains your nervous system. It teaches you that not every desire needs obedience. Not every upgrade deserves yes. Not every convenience is worth the hidden cost. Cooking more, spending slower, waiting longer, repairing instead of replacing, asking if the thing serves your future, not your mood. These are small acts on the surface. Underneath, they build command. Every refusal sharpens identity. Every unnecessary yes weakens it. Control grows in private, long before it shows in public. That is the sequence. Some people hear this and think it sounds joyless. It is not joyless. It is sober. There is a difference. Joy that depends on excess is fragile. Joy that comes from order is steadier. There is a quiet pride in knowing you are not leaking life through careless habits. There is peace in watching your reserves grow. There is dignity in knowing your decisions are no longer being pulled around by noise. Can you enjoy simplicity without feeling ashamed of it? That question reveals whether your ego still needs an audience. The truth is, less is not the final goal. Less is the clearing. It creates space for something stronger. Assets need capital. Capital requires margin. Margin requires restraint. This is basic, but basic is where fortunes begin. A person who masters less is no longer easy to trap. Marketing loses some power. Comparison loses some sting. Relief loses some authority. You start to see every saved dollar as a worker waiting for instruction, not spare cash waiting to disappear. That change matters more than it looks. When money stops being random, life starts becoming strategic. When life becomes strategic, fear starts losing ground. And when fear loses ground, choices get cleaner. This is where most people stop, because simplicity is not glamorous enough for their pride. But pride has bankrupted better-dressed people than you can count. Restraint looks quiet while it is building force. A seed in the ground looks unimpressive too. That does not mean nothing is happening. Less now can become more later. More now often becomes less later. Choose with your eyes open. You do not need to cut everything. You need to cut what weakens you. Waste, vanity spending, emotional spending, constant upgrades, needless debt, hidden leaks, empty subscriptions, unplanned convenience. Every cut is a vote. Every vote shapes identity. You are training yourself to live as a builder, not a spender. As a steward, not a consumer. As a person who directs resources, not a person who reacts to feelings. That identity shift will prepare you for the next command, the command that quietly separates those who stay trapped from those who begin to build. Because once margin exists, every dollar starts asking the same question: where do I go now? And the answer to that question determines whether money dies in your hands or starts multiplying in silence. Chapter 7. Make every dollar a worker. Once you stop leaking, the money that remains becomes visible in a new way. It no longer feels like random leftovers. It starts to feel like potential, and potential carries responsibility, because money left idle has a strange effect on an undisciplined mind. It begins to itch. It invites fantasy. It whispers that there must be something fun, urgent, or deserved to do with it. That is why this stage matters. You need a new command. Every dollar must have a job before your feelings try to assign it a different one. When money enters your life, is it greeted by a plan or by impulse? That answer explains a lot. The truth is, wealthy families do not just earn differently, they instruct money differently. They do not leave large portions of financial life to mood. They decide where money goes before life starts making demands. They know money without direction usually returns to distraction, so they create systems, buckets, priorities, percentages, and rules that remove drama from the process. Drama is expensive. Clarity is efficient. A dollar with no assignment becomes easy prey. That is the principle. This is where most people stop. They wait until the month is underway to react. Bills hit, feelings rise, surprises happen, then whatever remains gets called savings if they are lucky. That is backward. Savings is not what survives chaos. Savings is what must be protected from chaos. Investment is not an afterthought. It is an order. Asset building is not what happens if nothing goes wrong. It is what happens because you decided it matters before the noise began. What if your money moved by rule instead of emotion? What would change first? Probably more than you think. Making every dollar a worker means understanding roles. Some money protects, some money grows, some money maintains life, some money improves skill, some money repairs risk. If all money is treated the same, it gets mixed into consumption too easily. But when you name the role, you sharpen the choice. This part covers living. This part builds reserves. This part buys ownership. This part improves capacity. This part is not to be touched. That last sentence is crucial. Untouchable money builds serious lives. Money that is always available is never safe. Power grows where rules are stricter than moods, and rules are acts of self-respect. Many people resist this because it feels restrictive. They want flexibility. But what they often call flexibility is just unstructured drift. Drift leads to regret. Structure leads to agency. You do not need perfect complexity. You need consistency. A simple system followed faithfully will beat a brilliant plan followed only when life feels calm. This is also where long-term thinking becomes real. Assets do not appear by accident. They are fed, quietly, repeatedly, a little at a time at first. That may sound slow, but slow is not the enemy. Directionless is the enemy. Money compounds through repetition, not excitement. The person who keeps sending disciplined dollars into useful places is building force, even when the visible results feel small. Small is not meaningless. When small is repeated with discipline, that is how structures rise. Consider the opposite pattern. A person earns, spends freely, saves inconsistently, and invests only after guilt or panic. That person will always feel late, always feel behind, always feel like wealth is some mysterious event that happens to others. But wealth is often less mysterious than people want to admit. It is repeated instruction, repeated restraint, repeated allocation, repeated refusal to break the system for temporary comfort. This is where most people stop, because repetition feels boring. They want a dramatic move, a sudden break, a lucky hit. They want money to change because drama is easier to feel than discipline. But quietly wealthy people often win through dull consistency, not flashy genius, not public brilliance, just the refusal to keep starting over every month. That refusal changes bloodlines. $1 can disappear in a day. $1 can also become part of a machine. Your choices decide which future it enters. The truth is, once money becomes a worker, you stop asking it to entertain you. You ask it to serve. You ask it to defend your future. You ask it to buy time, reduce fear, increase options, and eventually outlive your daily labor. That is a mature relationship with money. It is no longer personal. It is purposeful. Do your dollars leave your hands tired, or do they leave with orders? That question separates consumers from builders. You do not need millions to start acting like an owner. Ownership begins as a mindset, long before it becomes a number. The person with a modest income and sharp allocation often moves toward real freedom faster than the high earner with chaotic habits. Because habits scale, disorder scales too. If you cannot command small amounts, larger amounts will not rescue you. They will only expose you faster. That is why this stage matters so much. It is not just about money. It is about identity under structure. You are becoming someone who does not merely receive resources, you deploy them. And once that shift takes hold, another truth rises with it. It is not enough to direct money well. You must also direct your attention, because in a distracted life, even good systems can break under the pressure of noise, temptation, and emotional fatigue. Chapter 8. Protect your mind from noise. There is a reason disciplined financial people often seem calmer. It is not because life stopped testing them. It is because they learnt that attention is a financial asset. If your mind is scattered, your decisions will be scattered. If your thoughts are constantly hijacked by trends, fear, envy, outrage, and stimulation, your money will eventually follow that chaos. Noise is not just sound. It is anything that weakens your ability to see clearly. What enters your mind every day that pushes you toward urgency, comparison, or impulse? That is not a small question. The truth is, most people lose money before they spend it. They lose it in attention first. Their focus gets captured by endless wanting. More things, faster upgrades, constant opinions, manufactured emergencies, financial fear, financial fantasy. It becomes hard to think in straight lines when your mind is being pulled in 10 directions by people trying to sell you something, provoke you, or keep you watching. A distracted person becomes easy to influence. An easy person to influence becomes easy to profit from. That is why mental control matters. This is where most people stop. They treat money as a numbers problem and ignore the environment shaping their behavior. But environment has power. If every day begins with noise, your standards drop. If every night ends with scrolling through other people's highlights, your appetite grows. If every conversation around you is filled with panic, gossip, and display, your own discipline has to work twice as hard just to stay upright. You cannot build a clear financial life inside a constantly clouded mind. Something has to be protected. Protecting your mind means reducing unnecessary inputs, fewer voices, fewer comparisons, fewer emotional hooks disguised as entertainment. It means creating silence where thought can mature. Silence is not empty. Silence lets you hear your own life accurately. It lets you notice where your money is drifting. It lets you observe cravings before they become actions. It lets you ask harder questions without instantly numbing the answers. The quietly wealthy often practice forms of silence the public rarely respects. They do not explain every move. They do not chase every trend. They do not constantly update their identity to match the crowd. They build in private, because private space protects focus. Public performance often fractures it. Silence protects clarity. Clarity protects decisions. Decisions repeated protect your future. That sequence matters. Noise also affects your sense of enough. The more outside standards you consume, the harder it becomes to feel grounded in your own. Suddenly, simple things feel insufficient. Progress feels invisible. Patience feels foolish. The result is dangerous. You begin to abandon solid plans in favor of emotional reactions. You speed up where you should slow down. You buy where you should wait. You quit where you should persist. This is where most people stop, because they do not understand that peace is productive. They think calm is passive. It is not passive. Calm is control under pressure. Calm is the refusal to let the world set your financial rhythm. Calm is what lets you keep building while others keep reacting. Does your daily routine strengthen your control or weaken it? Be honest. Your routine is already writing your future. Protecting your mind also means guarding who gets a voice in your financial life. Advice from undisciplined people is costly, even when offered with confidence. Many people speak loudly about money while living in quiet disorder. They give opinions built from pride, fear, or outdated pain. If you listen to every voice, your own standards will blur. You need fewer voices and stronger filters. Not everyone deserves influence. Not every opinion deserves entry. Not every example deserves imitation. That is power. There is a kind of emotional sobriety that grows here. You stop needing every trend. You stop chasing every opportunity that promises fast results. You stop confusing motion online with real movement in life. You become harder to hook. That hardness is useful. It protects patience, and patience is one of the rarest financial strengths in modern life. What have you rushed into because silence felt too slow? That question exposes more than money. It exposes your relationship with stillness. The truth is, wealth building requires a mind that can tolerate quiet seasons. Seasons with no applause, no obvious proof, no fast thrill, just systems running, habits holding, and assets growing beneath the surface. If your mind always needs stimulation, you will interrupt your own progress. You will mistake boredom for failure. You will keep touching things that need time. That is how people ruin good plans. That is how people leave solid roads for exciting cliffs. By protecting your attention, you protect the discipline that your money now depends on. And once discipline, structure, and mental control begin to work together, something deeper starts to change. You stop behaving like a person trying to escape poverty and start behaving like a person creating a lineage. That shift is not cosmetic. It is identity at the root. Chapter 9. Become the first builder. At some point, the question changes. It is no longer only about your bills, your habits, or your current survival. It becomes larger, sharper, heavier in the right way. What kind of person are you becoming in the bloodline? Are you another carrier of confusion, or are you the interruption? That is what this chapter is about. Becoming the first builder. The first person who looks at inherited patterns and says, it stops here. Not with anger, not with drama, with decision. If nothing changes in your habits, what exactly are you passing forward? Think carefully. The truth is, generational wealth starts as generational discipline. Before there are large accounts, There are different standards in place, different conversations, different emotional reactions, different defaults. A builder is not just somebody who earns more. A builder changes what becomes normal in the family. Saving becomes normal, planning becomes normal, delayed gratification becomes normal, ownership becomes normal, quiet control becomes normal. That is how lineages turn. Not through a speech, through repeated behavior that children can feel. This is where most people stop. They want to help the next generation, but they do not want to become different enough for the next generation to learn something new by watching them. They talk about providing, but they still live in confusion. They say they want their children to have it better, but their own relationship with money remains emotional, fearful, and reactive. Children do not absorb what you announce, they absorb what you normalize. If a child copied your money habits exactly, would that child become secure or stressed? That answer is a mirror. Being the first builder often means living misunderstood for a while. People around you may not understand why you say no more often, why you care less about display, why you track things, why you plan ahead, why you protect margin, why you resist waste. Some will call it extreme, some will call it boring, some will call it unnecessary. But what they often mean is simple. Your discipline makes their drift more visible. Do not let that weaken you. Builders are often inconvenient to people who are loyal to old patterns. The first disciplined person in a confused environment will always feel some friction. That friction is not a sign to stop. It is proof that the pattern has been interrupted. A builder also thinks beyond personal comfort. You start asking different questions. How do I create stability that does not die with my mood? How do I buy time my children never have to purchase in a panic? How do I teach the difference between income and ownership? How do I make sure the next set of hands receives not only resources, but wisdom? That last part matters. Money without training can disappear in a generation. But money, joined with standards, language, discipline, and clear examples, becomes something stronger. It becomes culture, a private family culture of stewardship, a way of seeing money that is sober, calm, and strategic. That is what wealthy families teach without always saying it out loud. They teach it through normal life, through what is praised, through what is questioned, through what is delayed, through what is protected. What private standards are you willing to make normal from now on? That question is where legacy begins. This is where most people stop, because legacy thinking feels too distant when present pressure is loud. But legacy is not built later. It is built in today's smallest repeated choices. A child watching you wait rather than impulse buying is learning a lesson. A child who hears you talk about assets rather than only bills is receiving a lesson. A child growing up in a home where money is handled with calm instead of chaos is receiving a lesson. Even if there are not many dollars yet, the culture is already forming. Culture matters before capital. Character matters before scale. Standards matter before inheritance. That order protects everything. The truth is, you may be the first person in your line asked to do this without a model. That is difficult. It can feel lonely. It can feel unfair. You may have to learn in public what others were taught in private. You may have to build what others were handed. But there is dignity in being first. Being first means pain did not have the final word. Confusion did not remain king. Somebody stood up inside the family story and created a new pattern from raw will and repeated choice. You do not need to wait for abundance to act like a builder. You need standards now. This is not fantasy. It is structure in human form. You are becoming a reference point. The person others will remember as the one who got serious, the one who stopped performing, the one who made different decisions, the one who put bricks where there had only been talk. And once that identity settles into your bones, the final shift becomes possible. Not a temporary burst of motivation, not a seasonal cleanup, a permanent internal standard that changes how you move through the rest of your life. Chapter 10. The Standard That Outlives You. This is the final turn, and it is not about hype, it is about permanence. There is a difference between a person who is trying to get life together and a person who has accepted a new standard. Trying depends on mood. Standard survives mood. Trying is negotiable. Standard is not. Trying fades when pressure rises. Standard speaks most clearly under pressure. That is why lasting wealth begins inside identity before it settles into accounts. What have you been treating like a phase that should have become a standard by now? Sit with that. The truth is, most people experience short bursts of financial seriousness, a scare, a debt moment, a hard month, a flash of motivation. For a while, they tighten up, track things, cut back, and speak the language of change. Then life relaxes a little, and the old self returns. Why? Because the behavior was temporary, but the identity stayed the same. They still saw themselves as someone who reacts, someone who slips, someone who starts over later. A standard kills that cycle. A standard says, this is who I am now. A standard removes debate from ordinary choices. This is where most people stop. They want results without identity cost. They want a stronger life while protecting the weaker self that created the current one. But that cannot happen. You cannot keep the same emotional loyalties and expect a different future. At some point, certain behaviors must stop feeling available to you, not because you are forcing yourself every second, but because your self-respect has matured beyond them. A standard is not a rule you follow when convenient. A standard is a line you no longer cross. That is power. The quietly wealthy often live from standards the world barely notices. They do not spend to soothe. They do not inflate life to match income. They do not let envy vote. They do not leave saving to chance. They do not abandon asset building when boredom sets in. They do not confuse silence with stagnation. They do not need to explain the restraint to people addicted to display. Those standards outlive emotion. Those standards create stability. Those standards become inherited long before the will is written. If you hold this line long enough, something beautiful happens. You stop feeling like you are fighting yourself every day. Order becomes natural. Simplicity becomes dignified. Patience becomes less painful. You no longer need every purchase to prove progress, because progress is now structural. It is in your systems. It is in your calm. It is in your ability to say no without grief. It is in the money that remains, grows, and begins carrying the weight your labor used to carry alone. Can your future trust your current self? That question should decide a great deal. The standard that outlives you is built from a handful of convictions repeated until they become character. Money is a tool, not a trophy. Income is seed, not permission. Assets matter more than applause. Discipline protects choice. Silence protects clarity. Living below your means is not playing small. It is building from strength. Those convictions are simple. Their effect is massive. This is where most people stop, waiting to feel ready for permanent change. But readiness often appears after a decision, not before it. You become ready by carrying the standard long enough for it to start carrying you. That is how identity hardens in the right direction, not through inspiration, through repeated proof. You do what builders do. Then you become a builder. You hold the line. Then the line starts holding you. The truth is, wealth from nothing is rarely born from luck. It is born from seeing clearly, cutting ruthlessly, living deliberately, allocating intelligently, and refusing to perform for a world that profits from your confusion. It is born from becoming emotionally different around money. Less needy, less reactive, less visible perhaps, but far more powerful. And power is not loud. Real power is the bill that does not shake you, the purchase you do not need, the silence you can sit in, the future you can fund without panic. That is legacy in motion. If your children never hear a speech from you about money, what will your life still teach them? That is the final test. Not what you say, what you normalize. If you normalize order, they inherit a different nervous system. If you normalize patience, they inherit a different timeline. If you normalize assets, restraint, thought, and control, they inherit more than money. They inherit orientation. They inherit a map, and a map can save generations from wandering. So let this settle in the deepest part of you. You were not born too late. You were not disqualified because nobody taught you early. You were not sentenced to repeat what you saw. You can become the first builder. You can set a standard that survives your moods, your wounds, and eventually your own lifetime. And when that standard becomes real, wealth is no longer just something you hope to have. It becomes a byproduct of who you choose to be. Wealth begins when emotion stops leading money. A quiet life with assets is stronger than a loud life with payments. Discipline is not restriction, it is financial self-respect. The life you normalize becomes the legacy you leave. Money stays where control is stronger than craving. Silence protects the mind that builds. What you refuse today can protect bloodlines tomorrow. The standard you accept in private becomes your family's future. Power is not what you show. Power is what remains. The truth is, legacy starts the moment confusion ends. Let me ask you something that will keep you awake tonight. If you died tomorrow, what would your money say about you? Would it tell a story of discipline, of choices made with clarity, of a life that refused to be owned by things? Or would it whisper about payments you couldn't escape, about doors that never opened, about a family that inherited your worry instead of your wisdom? Most people never ask this question because the answer terrifies them. But you are not most people anymore. You have listened to this audiobook because something inside you already knows your current path is not your final destination. You are here because you are ready to choose differently, and that choice, made today, changes everything. This is the moment where most people turn back. They nod their heads, feel inspired for a few hours, and then slip right back into the same habits that kept them trapped for years. Because knowing is comfortable. Doing is terrifying. But let me be brutally honest with you. Inspiration without action is just entertainment. And you didn't spend your time on this audiobook to be entertained. You came here because you wanted a different life. Not a better car, not a bigger house, a different life. The kind that gives you freedom to wake up when you want, to say no to work you hate, to give your children something you never had, not money, but choice. That life is not coming to you. You have to walk toward it. And the first step is deciding, right now, that you will not waste what you have just learned. So here is your final instruction. Before you close this audiobook, before you move on to the next distraction, do one thing. Open your phone, open your notes app, and write down one financial rule you will never break again. Not 10 rules, not 20. One, the one that matters most to you. Maybe it is saving before spending. Maybe it is never buying something you don't need with money you don't have. Maybe it is teaching your child about money before the world teaches them debt. Write it down, read it out loud, and promise yourself that this rule will be the foundation of everything that comes next. Because wealth is not built in a day, it is built in 1,000 small decisions. And the first of those decisions starts now, with you, with this rule, with the life you are finally brave enough to build.